What have you been doing, huh? Leaving your husband freaking alone all this damn time.
Oh, you're alive. Good. Now you can sign the divorce papers. I confronted my husband, who was in the hospital after being seriously injured in a car accident, with the divorce papers that I had already filled out.
What? Explain all this stupid bullshit now. What did I ever do to you that made me deserve this kind of cruelty? You're my wife, and yet you mean to abandon your right of taking care of your critically injured husband?
How dare you? You're the one who cheated on me.
There's a line you don't freaking cross when it comes to just how stupid nonsense can be, Svet. Where's the proof of this affair of mine that you seem to be so convinced of?
My husband may be willing to go to any lengths to accuse me of absurdity with any foundation, but I actually had more than enough proof in my hand. I thrust all the evidence under his nose, and as he went on to check it in detail, his skin turned increasingly pale as he began to shake and tremble. And then, I told him something more to deliver the final blow. This is the very strange story of what my husband did that made me lose respect for him first, before losing all other positive feelings for him, and how his unacceptable actions were met with the consequences they deserved. Hi, I'm a Russian-born American by the name of Svetlana Vasilyev, but most of my friends and my own parents call me Svet. I'm 28 years old and I work in an office that runs a locally popular chain restaurant. My husband, Vito, is 30 years old and works for a wholesale food company run by his father, Mr. Roque. Because our occupations were relatively similar when it came to the domain of business they were undertaking, I met Vito when I was asked to assist a senior of mine to create a contract with Mr. Roque's company for ingredients and such. Things started off really quickly at first. Vito approached me extremely obviously the first time we met, and he went on to ask me to go out with him. I was attracted to his work ethic, his sense of professional responsibility, and earnest personality. So while I wasn't really looking for a relationship when I first met him, I agreed to go out for a cup of coffee. And oh my gosh, I've never had so much fun with another man. It was like a dream come true. We started in mid-afternoon in a coffee shop he frequented, and I loved that the staff seemed to know him well, especially the matron of the establishment. She was so sweet, and the conversation between the three of us was sparkling. We stayed there far longer than we intended. We then went to a rather unusual place for dinner. He took me to a quieter part of the city and introduced me to an inconspicuous food truck. The business was run by his best friend and his parents, and they were well regarded as the makers of the best burritos this side of the Pacific. I really wondered why the rumors stopped there and didn't go on to claim they were the best burritos in the whole world. Let me tell you, that stuff could be a core memory of literally everyone that ate it. We then topped off the evening with a drink in a bar run by yet another one of his friends, and together, they made me laugh so frickin' hard that I nearly passed out a few times. That night changed everything for me. Vito turned out to be a very eccentric character outside the workplace, and the whole city seemed to know him well. He could talk about anything, and he didn't need people to make conversation. He was very interested in my life when we were together. Walking to our next destination and hearing us talk, you could say we've known each other for years. This yin and yang between personalities made me infatuated with him, and we became a couple. Things snowballed, and 3 years ago, we got married. And up until recently, we had been living together as a working couple. When we first got married, Vito was busier than I, but then I was promoted and my own days became a lot busier. Since then, my in-laws have been, for lack of a better word, interfering in our marriage, especially my mother-in-law, Ms. Roque, who called me pretty much every day. The content of her calls was mostly about my work. "I'm worried about you, Svet dear. If you work overtime at a company like that and get sick, it would be terrible, not just for you, but for everyone that loves you. At Franco's company, you'd be one of the family, and we could help you work more leisurely hours while still making enough to support yourself." Thank you for your concern, Mrs. Roque. I'm really sorry if I worry you, but I assure you I'm fine. She was recommending I change jobs in this manner, but she was also expressing concern for my health. I really didn't know whether to feel sympathetic and thankful or suspicious and annoyed. I asked Vito about his mother's calls. "Honey, your mother calls me every day. She's apparently pretty worried about my health, and she's always recommending that I change jobs. Did you say something to her?"
Well, come to think of it, the other day I told her that you were pretty busy these days. Working extra hours almost every day and stuff like that?
Oh, Vito. Why do you say unnecessary things like that? It would make her worry more.
I guess that's true. I'll tell her not to worry.
Thank you. At that time, I thought that neither my husband nor my mother-in-law had any bad intentions, and I felt bad for causing them any unnecessary worry. However, after that, for some reason the idea of changing jobs came up from various sources, and I became more and more confused about the nature of the situation. One day I received a phone call from my father-in-law, Mr. Roke.
Svetlana, dear, I heard that you're going to quit your job. But is it true that you're coming to work for my company?
Excuse me, sir? I'm afraid I don't understand. I assure you I'm not quitting my current job.
Ah, so you're not quitting. Good, good. I guess I just wasn't clear enough. Sorry, my dear.
That's how he ended the conversation, but I had so many questions it was hard to manage them all. I checked with my husband to make sure, but he said he didn't remember telling anything about it to him. Your father called to confirm that I was quitting my job and was going to work for his company. I have no idea why that's becoming a thing. Do you know anything that may help?
Sorry, I don't think I do. Dad must have been mistaken somehow.
That's why I want to know why he made that mistake.
Damn, you're persistent. You're so nitpicky about every little detail. I'm tired. I'm so damn tired.
Vito was too tired to listen to me. A single possibility occurred to me. Mrs. Roke could be pulling unnecessary strings to force me into quitting my current job. One could say she'd been pushing for me joining her husband's company for pretty long. And she might even have been trying to prepare for my transfer in advance so that everything would have to be done a lot more smoothly. I eventually thought that pursuing the matter too much would affect our relationship. So I decided against asking her directly and stayed calm. A few days later, however, the situation spiraled in a direction that I did not want to go. And things just could not go on. Immediately after arriving at work one day, my boss called me in for a meeting with him and the manager of human resources. He told me that he had been tipped off by an outside source that I was working a second job. Moreover, the company I was working for was none other than Roke's, my father-in-law's company. The company did not believe the information because they had determined that it was impossible for me to have a second job at a regular company due to my working hours at the office. But they were concerned that there might be a family issue because of the fact that my own father-in-law ran the company the source claimed I was working for. My supervisor advised me.
We're considering assigning you an important project for our enterprise's new restaurant opening. Just make sure you take care of any concerns about this, and focus your mind on the task we'd hope you'd be perfect for.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. In other words, this situation was going to affect my work and my performance, and I needed to look into it and resolve it immediately. Since my husband wouldn't take me up on this, I decided to ask Mr. Roke directly. That's when my ears would hear a very unbelievable story. I was told that I had been employed by his company since last month, and that he was actually paying me a salary. Moreover, my status at his company was immediately treated as employee with illness, and he had even been issued a medical diagnosis for mental illness by a pharmacist.
It was Vito that asked me to do all of this, by the way. He told me that you got mentally ill from the stress of your job, which took a toll on your performance and eventually caused the company to dismiss you. But you didn't want us to know about all that. Am I right?
I'm afraid not, sir. I'm telling you that these are all lies. There has to be some mistake.
When I called you the other day, I was trying to confirm the date of your resignation. But when you said you weren't, and still aren't planning to retire, I immediately thought it was strange.
I remembered the strange phone call I got from Mr. Roke from a few days earlier.
After that, Vito actually scolded me a little for having left you alone without taking action about getting you employed here. So I did as Sita told me to, took the necessary procedures for you to join our company, and handed over your insurance card and salary to Vito.
Is that so? I'll ask Vito about it, sir, and I'll call you later with the details. Thank you very much. It turned out that it was Vito himself that was the one who started the rumor that I was working a side job in addition to the job I usually do. But I didn't know why he would do such a thing. My husband came home that day and I questioned him about it. In response, he told me something that was about the most ridiculous answer I'd ever heard from anyone.
I wanted you to quit your job, so I asked Dad to treat you as an employee with a chronic illness.
He then continued in pressuring me to quit my job. The reason being that he couldn't continue married life with a woman who was likely to get a better job than him, one that did more for the community and one that paid much better than his own job. Oh my God, Vito! You have no idea what you're doing to me! My boss suspected me of working a second job, and my own father-in-law thought I was mentally ill.
What's wrong with all that? You could retire without much of a problem and just take it easy with your health.
Are you serious right now? I'm going to have a bad stain on my career history because I was fired after becoming mentally ill, which is completely untrue.
All that aside, it's about time you took your role as a wife more seriously. You can't keep working extra hours and doing whatever you want if you want to fulfill your important duties as my wife. Remember, a wife lives to help her husband. Everything else comes second to the principal.
I was beyond angry by Vito's selfishness. I was downright disgusted. The discussion that day ended with a very obvious rift between Vito and I decided to tell Mr. Roque exactly what he had said. My father-in-law had already rescinded my employment at his company, but he said he had not yet resolved the issue of the salary paid and the forged psychiatric medical diagnosis. I told him, "Please, don't tell Vito anything. I want to check things out for myself for a while first, so before anything else, please tell me which psychiatrist it was that issued that medical diagnosis." I got a copy of the diagnosis from Mr. Roque and went on to call the actual clinic. When I told the receptionist my name, she said, "Ah, yes. Your next appointment is scheduled for tomorrow, Mrs. Roque. Would you like to change it?" I was so surprised that I was momentarily lost in blank confusion. I had thought that the medical diagnosis was a forgery, which meant that there should be no record of any visits of mine to the hospital. However, the fact that the receptionist recognized my name and even specified that I had an appointment the following day changed quite a few things. I was genuinely upset, but I managed to tell the receptionist, "No, ma'am, it's fine as it is. I just forgot what the time of my appointment was." "Ah, of course. Let's see. It's tomorrow, Saturday, at 11 a.m., ma'am." "I see. Thank you very much." "No problem. Have a nice day." I hung up the phone and just sat there stunned for a long while. All I could conclude from all of this information was that my husband and my imposter were in cahoots in this scheme. But how in the world did I get a psychiatrist's appointment? I always carried my insurance card in my wallet, which was taken care of by my workplace. So I definitely had it with me on the day this medical diagnosis was issued. The card used to make the diagnosis must have been one in my name issued by Mr. Roque's company. I thought I would go to the hospital tomorrow to see who in the world would be there to see the doctor in my place, who was also named Svetlana Vasilyev. And given it was a very exotic name in town, I was very intrigued to see how Vito and his partner in crime would handle this situation. The next day, as I was waiting near the hospital entrance, a familiar car pulled into the parking lot. A young woman got out of it and Vito along with her. The woman walked with her arms around his biceps and leaned on him as they made for the hospital entrance. Vito held the woman by the shoulders and supported her as they walked inside. I couldn't believe what I'd just seen. There was no doubt in my mind that it was the woman who was receiving my diagnosis was my imposter. The fact that she was with my husband was the best proof I could think of. I walked up to my husband's car and unlocked it with my spare key. I then turned on the driving camera in the car and replayed the most recent recording. The footage showed my husband and the woman hugging and making out in the car. I recorded the footage on my cell phone. And the content of the conversation between Vito and this woman, whom he was having an affair with, was absolutely horrifying. "I want you to divorce your wife as soon as possible, darling. I'm going to go crazy if you don't. I love you so much."
I'm sorry, Erica. Just a little longer, and we'll all be over.
"How much longer? I can't live without you. Vito, darling, you know that, right?"
I know. I can't live without you either, Erica.
You know, it was definitely destiny that we met on a matching app. Do you know what happens if you go against fate?
Don't say such scary things, sweetie. You know that kind of talk gets me on the edge. You don't believe me? I'm letting you use my wife's salary from Dad's company and her insurance card for your appointments. I'm going to divorce my wife in due time with mental illness on her part as a reason for going through with it.
That's not enough, darling. A little digging and she's going to find out. Your wife needs to disappear before that happens.
All right.
That last thing that the woman called Erica said made my blood rush away from my face. My heart started to race. I knew I was in danger right then, so I hurried away from the parking lot immediately and went back to my house, packed my bags, and ran away to a hotel. The woman probably didn't know that her insurance card had expired, and thus she'd be charged everything out of her own pocket. I decided to lay low, not knowing what I should expect from the two hasty traitors. Later that evening, I got a call from Mrs. Roke, who sounded very upset. "Something terrible's happened, Svetlana, my dear. Vito has had an accident. He's mortally wounded and is in critical condition." I was so surprised by this unexpected turn of events that I rushed to the hospital immediately. At the hospital, my in-laws were waiting in front of the operating room with pale faces. "Oh, Svetlana, whatever shall we do?"
Calm down. Amy, we still have to tell her what's been going on.
How in the world did Vito have an accident? I then suddenly realized there were several people standing in the hallway of the hospital.
Excuse me, are you Svetlana Vasiliev, the wife of Mr. Vito Roke?
Yes, indeed, I am his wife, officer.
Ah, you're here just in time. We were stumped over what was going on, because the woman in the car with your husband had an insurance card with your name.
I was puzzled, and Officer Quimby explained in more detail. So here's the gist of it. Buckle up, because it's going to chill some sensitive viewers. The woman, whose real name was Erica, had an insurance card in my name, and it assumed my name. That part we all already know. But what was so scary was that she had voluntarily taken a large amount of sleeping pills and was in a state of intoxication when the accident occurred. The ID she had in her wallet was all in my name, so the police assumed they were married. However, everything went all what the frick when my in-laws, who arrived at the scene very quickly, identified Erica as a stranger. It was only after police told her to that Mrs. Roke contacted me. I explained to the officer what I knew and showed him the video I had taken on my phone, and he recognized the woman who was sitting in the driver's seat as the same woman who had been the perpetrator of what could very well be an intentional vehicular accident, which could also be regarded as attempted voluntary manslaughter given that she survived the crash. My in-laws were so depressed when they found out that their son had been cheating on his wife, and Mrs. Roke even started crying in a corner. "Vito said that he wanted to divorce you because you were mentally ill. Oh, Savette, my dear, I'm sorry for saying all those things about you changing jobs. I only thought that your marriage would get better if I gave you a better job that took your condition into more consideration."
I also took Vito's words to heart and never really checked out what he was claiming. I do hope you'll forgive me for being so indecisive and careless, my dear. I never thought my own son would do this.
Above all, I was furious when I heard that my husband had lied about me having a mental illness, mostly because he took advantage of his parents' kindness. Soon after the surgery, Vito was brought out of the ER. He looked dangerously pale, and most of his face and body were bandaged up, and he even had multiple going into his arms and chest. He was still unconscious, but he was breathing steadily. According to the head doctor, he had suffered internal damage due to severe bruising in the crash and was bleeding profusely. They succeeded in stopping the bleeding and said there was nothing more to worry about. He was going to recover fully within perhaps a month or so. His parents were relieved that their son was okay, but they were not happy to learn the circumstances of his injuries. Personally, I was not in the mood to stay with my lying, cheating husband, so I told the Rokes I was done for the day and left the hospital. I wanted to know the true nature of the affair before I left, but they wouldn't let me visit Erica, who had also undergone treatment in the ER. She was probably going to be arrested given that she had perpetrated a legitimate crime, and there were a couple of cops standing guard in front of her hospital room. It seemed like she really had it coming. In the days that followed, Vito texted me and called me several times while he was in the hospital, but I ignored all of them. He had been giving his parents bitter excuses about the situation, adamantly claiming that he was not having an affair with the woman who had been driving the car when the crash occurred, and that they were just friends. I personally had solid evidence to confirm the affair, but I wanted to see how he would treat me first. So I had asked Mr. and Mrs. Roque, as well as Officer Quimby, to keep quiet about the video evidence I had shown them. Erica was arrested for dangerous driving, but since Vito, who was the victim in this case, didn't file a victim report and didn't claim she had attempted voluntary manslaughter, she was therefore only released with a penalty fine. But I wasn't going to let it end there, and I was going to settle the case once and for all. A few days later, I visited Vito in his hospital room. He looked quite a bit better already. His face was no longer bandaged, and he only had a few tubes going into his arms now, providing nutrients and blood. No sooner had he seen me walk inside than he began to yell at me.
And what have you been doing, huh? Leaving your husband frickin' alone all this damn time?
Oh, you're alive. Good. Now you can sign the divorce papers. I confronted him with divorce documents that I had already filled out.
What? Explain all this stupid bullshit, now. What did I ever do to you to make me deserve this kind of cruelty? You're my wife, and yet you mean to abandon your right of taking care of your critically injured husband?
How dare you? You're the one who cheated on me.
There's a line you don't frickin' cross when it comes to just how stupid nonsense can be, Svet. It just so happened that my lady friend was driving. Where's the proof of this affair of mine that you seem to be so convinced of, eh?
My husband may be willing to go to any lengths to accuse me of absurdity with any foundation. And perhaps he really could be confident here, given that I had discovered that all the footage from the driving camera that had been retrieved when the car was taken away had been destroyed. I guess he was thorough there, since I used the car myself sometimes. He must have realized there was a chance it recorded everything that happened inside and went and deleted them all. Luckily, this was after I took the video in the parking lot of the psychiatric hospital. And right there, right then, I showed him the video and audio that I had recorded. His skin turned increasingly pale as he began to shake and tremble. Are you still going to pretend that I don't know what was going on at all? Listen carefully, Mr. Roque. Not only will you be sued for alimony for the affair, but I've also told the clinic that you used someone else's insurance card. That's grounds for fraud, and I wouldn't be surprised if they sue you for it.
No, please. I didn't mean to do that. But Erica threatened to kill me if I didn't marry her. Svet, honest. The day of the accident, I noticed her insurance card, or rather, yours. It was expired, so I thought it was a bad idea to stay together with her and broke off the relationship. That's when she locked the doors, took a bunch of sleeping pills, and then started driving.
Then divorce me and be happy with this psycho. I'll make sure I never get involved with you again.
Wait a minute. I finally figured it all out. Erica's the one who's mentally ill. I need you. Please. Please don't leave me.
As soon as she said that, Vito started hitting his head against his pillow, sobbing his eyes out with an expression of genuine depression on his face. Shaking and trembling, his pathetic demeanor notwithstanding, the sight didn't make me feel the least amount of pity. Instead, I said to him, "You also lied to your own parents on more than one occasion. You have no right to blame only your lover. Your father's company should also be suing you for fraud, but they told me that if you accept my demands for divorce, they'll show mercy." He then reluctantly signed the divorce papers after I told him so. After my divorce, Vito was not fired from his father-in-law's company, but his entire salary was taken care of by my in-laws to pay my alimony and to compensate for the fraud he'd done to the psychiatric hospital. Erica was arrested again by the police for using a fraudulent insurance card with malicious intent. And this one was convicted more seriously with time in prison. But after 2 years now, she will be out soon with a suspended sentence. I filed a claim through my lawyer against the woman, and according to him, she was planning to marry Vito when she got out of jail. From the lawyer's point of view, she seemed to have mental problems and was dangerously attached to Vito. And it seems that he will continue to give his parents more trouble in the future. I decided to take on a support staff position for a chain of restaurants that was expanding overseas. And this was the big project that my boss was telling me about. I had told my parents about the divorce, and they were worried that the psychopathic woman might resent me, track me down, and exact her own revenge. So they were very relieved to hear of my decision to move overseas. From now on, I'm going to work hard and develop my potential in a foreign country, far away from home, where I had a bad experience. And I'm going to live my life experiencing things anew, and hopefully make new friends and beyond in the process. Wish me luck!